All right, so get this. Imagine a world where closing the gender gap helps us tackle two huge global trends at once.
Hmm.
Aging populations in developed countries
Okay.
and booming youth populations in those developing countries.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of wild, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving into today with this new IMF report
Oh,
promoting gender equality and tackling demographic challenges 2024.
wow.
We're talking about how empowering women impacts everyone, really.
I think what's really fascinating about this report is that it doesn't just frame gender equality as like a social issue.
Right.
It dives right into the economics,
Yeah.
arguing that empowering women just makes good financial sense,
Yeah.
no matter where you are in the world.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Okay.
The report starts by painting a picture of these diverging demographics.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, the situation in developed nations sounds a little daunting.
Yeah.
Rapidly aging populations, shrinking workforces.
Yeah.
It feels like a recipe for economic trouble, doesn't it?
It does raise some concerns for sure.
Right.
The report highlights that in 50 years, the average person over 64 in a developed country will have only one working-age person to support them.
Wow.
Think about the strain that puts on social safety nets,
Uh-huh.
healthcare pensions, everything.
Yeah, wow, that image really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
But you're hinting that maybe it's not all doom and gloom.
Well, here's where the report takes a turn.
Okay.
It argues that increasing female labor force participation in both developed and emerging markets could actually offset those economic losses that we're projecting from shrinking workforces. In some cases, it might even reverse the trend.
Hold on, are you saying that simply getting more women into the workforce could actually boost the economy?
Yeah,
I'm all ears.
the data is compelling.
Yeah, okay.
The report finds that if developed nations simply close the gender gap in labor participation to match the best-performing countries, the median developed nation could avoid a whopping 25% GDP loss by 2050.
Wow.
Think about that.
Yeah.
It's like country X suddenly losing a quarter of its entire economy, like shutting down all their manufacturing and tourism industries overnight.
Yeah.
But by simply empowering women to participate fully in the workforce, they could avoid that scenario altogether.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah,
And a pretty clear incentive for change.
for sure.
But is it really that simple?
Well,
Are we just talking about more people paying taxes?
it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
A larger pool of skilled female workers boosts overall productivity, leading to more innovation and economic activity.
Right.
This naturally translates into higher tax revenue, which means more resources for those very social programs that support an aging population. And it also means stronger pension systems, which, let's face it, is something we all care about.
Yeah.
It's a win-win for everyone.
Okay, I see how that works on the developed nation side.
Yeah.
But what about those countries experiencing a different kind of demographic boom? Those developing nations with rapidly growing youth populations.
That's where the report dives into this really interesting concept called the demographic dividend. Imagine a country with a large young workforce, ready and eager to contribute.
Yeah.
That can be a massive engine for economic growth,
Right.
but only if those young people have the education and opportunities to succeed.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I recall the report also highlighting a major roadblock. Low education levels, especially for girls in many of these developing countries.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The report points out that many low-income and developing countries are essentially missing out on this potential demographic dividend.
Yeah.
Because they're not investing enough in education,
Yeah.
particularly for girls.
Right.
They're limiting their future workforce's potential and ultimately hindering their own economic growth.
So we're looking at a missed opportunity on a global scale if we don't get this right.
Yeah, it's a big concern.
But how do we translate this massive problem into something tangible?
Well,
What would this look like in the real world?
let's take Senegal as an example. The report estimates that if Senegal could ensure that all children receive at least 5 years of education, their GDP could increase by a remarkable 8%.
Wow.
And we see similar potential gains projected for Nigeria and Sierra Leone.
Okay.
We're talking about significant leaps forward simply by investing in human capital.
That 8% figure is impressive.
It is.
It really highlights the power of education as a tool for economic development.
Absolutely.
Clearly, both developed and developing nations have a lot to gain from closing this gender gap.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make it happen?
Well,
What are some of the concrete policy solutions the report recommends?
you know how we were talking about that connection between getting more women into the workforce and actually seeing a rise in birth rates in developed countries,
Yeah.
it seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But the report suggests that with the right policies in place,
Yeah.
we can actually make it easier for women to have both a thriving career and a family.
It's like we're breaking free of that old either-or trap that so many women face.
Right.
Have you ever felt that pressure, listener?
Yeah.
The report suggests that affordable and accessible childcare is like a game changer.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
The report really emphasizes public childcare as a key policy solution.
Yeah.
By making quality childcare more affordable and accessible, we can reduce the financial burden and time constraints
Right.
that often prevent women from returning to work after having children.
Yeah.
It's about giving women real choices. Wouldn't you agree?
You know, this reminds me of a friend who is a brilliant architect,
Uh-huh.
but she put her career on hold when she had kids.
Yeah.
The cost of childcare just ate up most of her potential salary.
Right.
It felt like a lose-lose situation for her.
Exactly. And that's a loss for the economy as a whole when we lose talented people like your friend.
You're right.
The report actually highlights how investing in public childcare pays off economically in the long run.
Okay.
Think about it. More women working equals higher tax revenues, which can then be used to fund those very same childcare programs.
Hmm.
It's a virtuous cycle.
So it's not just about doing what's right for families.
No.
It's about smart economic policy.
Exactly.
But let's be real, even with affordable childcare,
Yeah.
there are still those deeply ingrained social norms
Right.
that put most of the childcare responsibility on women.
Yeah.
How do we tackle that?
That's where policies like mandatory paternity leave come in.
Okay.
By encouraging fathers to take time off after a child is born, we start to shift those societal expectations.
Hmm.
It's not just about dad bonding with the baby.
Right.
It's about showing that men are equally responsible for caregiving, which then allows women to focus on their careers without feeling like they're choosing work over family.
I love that reframing. It's not just about giving women more opportunities. It's
Right.
about creating a system where men are equally involved in raising children.
Exactly.
The report even goes deeper, looking at the impact of something called labor market segmentation on fertility decisions, especially in countries with a strong dual labor market.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not sure I fully grasp that concept.
Okay, sure.
Can you break it down for us?
Think of it like two separate job worlds existing side by side.
Okay.
One has stable jobs, good benefits, and job security. You know, the kind of job where you can picture yourself settling in for the long haul.
Right.
That's the protected sector.
Okay.
Then there's the unprotected sector,
Yeah.
characterized by more precarious work, low wages, and few, if any, benefits. It's a much riskier landscape.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But how does that relate to having kids?
Well, imagine trying to plan for a family when you're constantly worried about your job security
Right.
or whether you can afford basic necessities.
Yeah.
It's a huge stressor. And the report suggests that this disparity in job security and income, especially for those stuck in the unprotected sector, can really discourage people from starting families.
That's a good point. I can see how economic uncertainty would make that decision a lot harder.
Yeah, for sure.
So, is the solution to dismantle this entire dual labor market system?
Well,
I mean, that sounds like a pretty monumental task.
it's certainly a complex issue, but the report focuses on policies that can at least reduce that segmentation
Okay.
and create a more level playing field.
Okay.
Things like strengthening employment protections, expanding access to social benefits like paid leave and healthcare,
Yeah.
and promoting more flexibility in the labor market.
So it's about creating a system where everyone has a fair shot at a decent job,
Exactly.
regardless of whether they're a man or woman or what sector they happen to be in.
Right. And when people feel more economically secure,
Yeah.
they're more likely to make those long-term commitments, like starting a family.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The report even uses the example of South Korea, a country known for its long work hours, some of the longest in the developed world,
Wow.
and its rigid dual labor market structure. This puts a lot of pressure on women in particular, making it really difficult to balance work and family life.
So what's the solution in a situation like that?
Well,
How do you even begin to address those deeply entrenched work cultures?
the report suggests that by easing those rigid regulations,
Okay.
for example, by revisiting strict firing restrictions that often protect only a segment of workers, we can actually create a more dynamic labor market where it's easier for women to participate and contribute.
It's like shifting away from this idea of a one-size-fits-all career path
Right.
and creating a system that's more adaptable to the needs of modern families.
And along those same lines, the report also emphasizes the need for more flexible work arrangements, like telecommuting flex time and part-time options.
Yeah.
These kinds of arrangements can have a huge impact on women's ability to stay in the workforce, even after having children.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in today's digital world where remote work is becoming increasingly common. But let's be realistic, implementing these kinds of policies,
Yes.
especially those related to childcare and parental leave,
Yeah.
can be expensive. How do we convince policymakers, especially in countries that are already facing budget constraints,
Right.
to invest in these solutions?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
But the report argues that the long-term economic benefits of closing the gender gap far outweigh those upfront costs.
Okay.
Remember that virtuous cycle we talked about?
Yeah.
Higher female labor force participation leads to increased productivity,
Right.
which means more economic activity, more tax revenue, and ultimately a stronger, more resilient economy for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm starting to see how this is all connected.
Yeah,
It's not just about social justice, it's about smart, forward-thinking economic policy.
absolutely.
But I imagine that these solutions might look different depending on the specific context of each country.
Yeah, of course.
What works in a developed nation might not be the right approach for a developing country.
Absolute context is everything.
Right.
The challenges and opportunities are going to vary greatly from country to country,
Yeah.
but the underlying message remains consistent.
Okay.
Investing in women is not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do if we want to build a more prosperous and equitable future.
Okay. I think we've laid a good foundation here.
Yeah.
But I want to shift gears a bit and focus on those policy solutions targeted specifically at developing nations.
Okay.
We touched on the importance of education,
Right.
but what are some of the other key recommendations the report highlights?
One area that really stands out is the need for investments in basic infrastructure.
Okay.
Things like reliable electricity, clean water, and sanitation systems. At first glance, these might seem more like development goals than gender equality policies.
Yeah.
But there's a strong connection.
I'm intrigued. Explain how those basic services link back to empowering women and boosting economic growth.
Think about it, in many developing countries, women and girls bear the brunt of the burden.
Yeah.
When it comes to tasks like collecting water, firewood, or tending to household chores,
Right.
these time-consuming activities limit their ability to pursue an education
Yeah.
or participate in the paid workforce.
So by investing in this basic infrastructure, we're essentially freeing up their time and giving them more opportunities to contribute to the economy.
Exactly.
It's like removing a major obstacle that's been holding them back.
Exactly. And the data supports this.
Okay.
Studies have shown a strong positive correlation between access to electricity and female employment rates.
Wow.
It's not just about making life easier, it's about unlocking their economic potential.
It's amazing to think that something as basic as access to electricity can have such a significant impact on women's lives and, by extension, on a country's economic trajectory.
Yeah.
What other key areas does the report highlight for developing nations? Another crucial recommendation is improving access to financial services for women.
Right.
We're talking about things like bank accounts, loans, and insurance. The tools that allow you to build financial security and participate fully in the economy.
Right.
In many developing countries, women face significant barriers to accessing these basic financial tools, limiting their ability to start businesses, invest in their education, or simply manage their household finances effectively.
It seems like a recurring theme in this report is about removing those barriers and creating a more level playing field so that everyone, regardless of gender, has the opportunity to succeed.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about giving women the agency to control their economic destinies and contribute to their communities. The report highlights the increasing role of fintech in expanding financial inclusion,
Okay.
particularly in rural areas where traditional banking services are often limited.
By fintech, you mean things like mobile banking apps and digital payment platforms?
Precisely. These innovations have the potential to revolutionize access to financial services, and the report encourages policymakers to embrace these technological advancements as a powerful way to empower women economically.
I can definitely see how those technologies could be game changers for women in areas with limited access to traditional banks.
Yeah, for sure.
This all makes perfect sense, but we also have to acknowledge that some of these issues we're discussing, like child marriage or gender-based violence, are deeply rooted in cultural norms and societal structures.
Mhm.
How do we address these challenges that go beyond simply providing access to education or financial services?
You're absolutely right. These are complex issues that require a multifaceted approach. But the report suggests that even in these challenging areas, economic empowerment can be a powerful catalyst for social change.
Yeah.
When women have more opportunities to earn an income and control their own finances, it can shift power dynamics within families and communities
Yeah.
and ultimately lead to a more just and equitable society.
So it's about creating a positive feedback loop where economic empowerment leads to social progress and vice versa.
Exactly.
What about the issue of family planning and reproductive health services?
Okay.
It's a topic that can often be politically charged, but I'm curious to hear how the report addresses it.
The report wisely avoids taking any specific political stance, but it does highlight the economic benefits of giving women greater control over their reproductive choices.
Okay.
When women have access to family planning services and accurate information, they can make informed decisions about when and if to have children. This often leads them to delay childbearing, pursue further education, and participate more fully in the workforce,
Yeah.
all of which contribute to a healthier and more prosperous society.
It's about empowering women to make the choices that are right for them and their families, and recognizing that these choices have far-reaching implications for society as a whole.
Exactly. And the report points out that investing in family planning is one of the most cost-effective development interventions available. Every dollar spent on family planning can save governments significant amounts down the line in healthcare and education costs.
It's a win-win from both a social and economic perspective. But as we've discussed throughout this deep dive, these are complex issues with no easy solutions. What do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
The key message is this: investing in gender equality is not just a nice thing to do, it's an economic imperative. This IMF report makes a compelling case that empowering women is essential for global economic stability and growth. It's not optional, it's a necessity.
We've covered a lot of ground today, listener, and we've thrown a lot of information your way. But here's the challenge we want to leave you with. What's one thing you can do in your own world to help break down these gender barriers? Maybe it's advocating for better childcare options at your workplace, mentoring a young woman in your field, or simply having those tough conversations with friends and family about how we can all contribute to a more equitable division of labor at home. The IMF report shows us that even small actions can have a ripple effect, and that collective action is key to creating a more just and prosperous future for everyone.
And here's one final thought to ponder.